Now, there is a stereotype which you will find in your textbooks to some extent and in the minds of people definitely, which is a very odd one, but very prevalent. And that is the stereotype of the great masculinist emperor. So it is imagined that golden ages, it's the golden age of the masculinist emperor. The golden age is when you have some gigantic political extent of a single state ruled over by a masculinist emperor or a series of masculinist emperors. And in their presiding over this wonderful thing, there is success and everyone is happy and everything's wonderful. Even Edward Gibbon, who was usually a very observant historian who wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, said in the reign of the 5 good emperors from 96 to 180 of the Common Era, even then these pages don't have a lot of history because everyone was happy and prosperous under their rule. Actually, they don't have a lot of history because most of the historical sources are lost for that period. So everyone just thinks, oh, well, then they must have had a happy rule because there were not a lot of revolts and events. But that isn't actually necessarily the case. And in fact, today, historians who are digging deeper are finding out such things. Actually, periods of historical creativity are usually those of great upheaval, difficulty, conflict, instability, and especially insecurity, more than they are periods of settlement and so on, which are more likely to be periods of stagnation. And you find that is true, for example, of the Renaissance in Italy, which was filled with upheaval and problems and wars and instability. And you can find that in the various historical periods of India, and even in such a stable and successful venture as China, which seems to prove the opposite of what I'm saying, because of all the countries on the earth, China was more often under a unified empire than not, and that's very exceptional. The Chinese empire was a much more successful venture than other empires, much more long-lasting, much stabler, and yet you can find that there too. The periods of upheaval were nevertheless not that unknown. And so the idea that you have to have some kind of big political unity on the map and that portrays a golden age, whose golden age? For example, is it even the case, if we're really looking at things fairly and objectively, that we should say, well, there was the Roman Empire in Western Europe, and then that was replaced by the Germanic barbarians who precipitated the Dark Ages. And so we have the Dark Ages of Western Europe when nothing was happening. Well, okay, but on the other hand, you had a localization of authority instead of a centralization far away in some imperial state. If you went back and asked the people which situation was better, are you sure you know what the answer would be? Are you sure that they would say the Roman Empire was better? And when you have those late Roman writers like Sidonius Apollinaris in the 5th century or so, writing about the, how miserable it was, that everything was falling apart, and or St. Augustine, for that matter, the city of God. Who are they writing for? And what is their social class when they're writing? They're the elite bemoaning their fate. But does that mean that the common people liked having a lot of organized tax collectors around? Or maybe they liked a situation where there was less central authority rather than more. And given that, it's not even sure that having a literary tradition is ultimately a benefit. It's a benefit for historians, but is it a benefit for the people at the time? Which is preferable? So it's better to stand back and not be too hasty in one's judgment about such things.